which gives us on behalf of the Climate Change Commission, it is my honor to present government initiatives this morning as regards circular economy and sustainable consumption and production. We are meeting today with urgent work ahead of us because there is a report just released last week by the United Nations body of climate scientists, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And this report has been described as code red for humanity. And we can no longer stop much of the effects of climate change. And many of these effects or impacts are felt much more severely here in the Philippines. As our climate scientists note, for example, in sea level rise, the level here at home may be rising at 4 times greater than the global average. And our country is in the typhoon belt, average of 20 typhoons a year visiting the Philippines. And this will become more problematic because scientists have also seen that they are growing more intense, more severe, typhoons and rainfall. The IPCC report makes it clear that our goal to limit global warming or global average temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius will be beyond reach in the next 20 years, unless we take rapid, immediate, large-scale reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. It might seem grim, this outlook, but it also gives us hope that we can still avert the worst impacts of climate change if we act now, and immediate steps are needed. So our talk this morning, or my presentation, is going to share on one of the steps that we are taking to speed up our reaching our national climate targets, and this is called approaching a circular economy. Circular economy and sustainable consumption and production, these can no longer be just for the long term or on the horizon, but we have to adopt them now or take the necessary changes in our policy and regulatory frameworks because climate change is here and every day we see it in the news in many, many parts of the world. In fact, as the IPCC report has also said, it is already affecting all regions of the world. And it also affects many sectors or all sectors. It is cross-cutting. And today, we zoom in on a key component of climate action aligned with our target under the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is our campaign to phase out and regulate single-use plastics. Plastic waste pollution has emerged as a pressing environmental threat, and there have been studies that say that 19 of Philippine rivers contribute to 80% of plastic pollution in the oceans. And scientists have also said that by 2050, there could be more plastic in the ocean than fish if we continue with our practices. And for the fisheries sector, there is a big problem of ingestion of plastic by marine animals, mammals, and microplastics have also been breaking down and entering into our food chain. Why would the CCC, our agency, which is a policy formulating body and program coordinating body on climate change, mainstreaming, why would we be concerned with plastics? Of course, aside from the big environmental issue of waste management and contamination and degradation of biodiversity, plastics are also produced from petrochemicals. They emit carbon emissions throughout their life cycle, from production to transport to use and all the way to their disposal. So the good news is that the House of Representatives has approved the Single-Use Plastic Regulation Act, or House Bill 9147, on final reading, as mentioned by the Deputy Speaker. And this bill, I'd like to recap, is going to phase out by tiers. 3 tiers. Tier 1, some products will be phased out in a year, and these are the most problematic unnecessary plastics like balloon holders, confetti, plastic labo that is very thin. This is really the ultimate single-use plastic. Once used, it has to be thrown away. Plastic stirrers and straws, which are not really needed if we think about it. The second tier is for phase out within 4 years, allowing for a transition and shift across the industry. The bill also mandates the establishment of extended producer responsibility based on the polluter pays principle. This approach requires producers to finance the cost of taking back, collecting, sorting, and recycling again of the products that they produce and profited from, but consumers no longer can use or they no longer want it. So this system proposed under the House bill and supported by the CCC will improve waste management, will incentivize consumers, retailers, and manufacturers, and lead the shift towards alternatives with government support. These are the key aspects of this proposal, which we hope will soon be approved as well in the Senate. Gusto ko sanang humingi ng suporta ng lahat ng participants ngayon. Please know more about this bill and support it on social media proactively. And this problem solution statement really is that we need a systemic change in order to move away from single-use plastic. We have a law, the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, which mandates segregation, recycling, but all our efforts for the last 20 years do not seem to solve the problem because there is really massive plastic leakage into the natural environment. So our approach is to cut down waste at the source, to reduce waste at the source, at the upstream. This is a legislative campaign and one of the aspects of the work that we are doing. And there is more work under the umbrella of the Cabinet Cluster on Climate Change, Adaptation, Mitigation, and Disaster Risk Reduction, or SICAM-DRR. These are 17 agencies. Kasama po ang CCC, chair po ang Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and we have many other agencies with mandates involved or related to climate change action. And in this cluster itself, we resolved to support a national phase-out regulation of single-use plastics, as well as create a technical working group on circular economy, sustainable consumption and production, and single-use plastics. So magkakasama po yung three-pronged strategy. And I'm happy to share the initiatives which will help us speed up the work through this cluster and to drive sustainability and the uptake of circular economy. For instance, for a stronger policy framework on circular economy, kung saan magsasanga-sanga yung mga programs and activities, our Department of Trade and Industry is working with the regional neighbors sa Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, for a framework of the circular economy for the ASEAN economic community. And this will be adopted very soon in October this year. And through this framework for the region, we will be able to identify partnerships and knowledge exchange initiatives in terms of technology and practices to support sustainable economic growth in the ASEAN. And this will help accelerate regional recovery from the pandemic. We also have to mention House Bill 7609. This is an act to promote circular economy and a whole-of-nation transition towards a sustainable future. Also authored by our keynote speaker, Deputy Speaker Legarda, and this will promote circular economy and sustainable consumption initiatives in the country. But this bill is still pending in the committee. So mas nauna po yung House Bill 9147 on single-use plastics regulation. Second point or action is that the NEDA, or the National Economic and Development Agency or Authority, is also leading the finalization of the Philippine Action Plan for Sustainable Consumption and Production, or PAP for SCP. Yan, tandaan po yung mga acronym kasi mahaba. The goal of PAP for SCP, and this will be adopted, they say, within the year, is to have more Filipinos produce and consume green goods and services. And this will accelerate also our shift to more climate smart and sustainable practices and lifestyles. Components of the PAP for SCP are institutionalizing natural capital accounting, determining ecological limits of systems, increasing innovation and investment in green technologies and systems, and setting up sustainable resource allocation and equitable sharing schemes. The PAP for SCP works to strengthen our national eco-labeling program, Green Choice Philippines, or NELPGCP, another set of acronyms. So this is a key initiative led by the DTI again. On the supply side, this NELPGCP encourages businesses to make and market greener products and use more environmentally sound processes and technologies. On the demand side, it gives consumers the means to make informed consumer or environmentally good choices. The third key action plan that we have to know about this morning is the National Plan of Action on Marine Litter. This is a national plan of action for prevention, reduction, and management of marine litter, and DNR has adopted it early this month. The NPOA goal is zero waste to Philippine waters by 2040, and this is composed of 10 strategies that will include, that will start from the very baseline of science-based information, how much marine litter is floating or is present in Philippine waters, mainstreaming circular economy and sustainable consumption initiatives, enhancing recovery and recycling coverage and markets for plastics, preventing leakage from collected or disposed waste. Because our statistics show that even after collection, when these waste are brought to the landfill, yet around 70% plus of single-use plastic waste still leak to the open environment. Also, this NPOA has proposals to manage litter that is already in marine environments. So kung ano man yung nandyan na sa mga ilog at dagat, meron din silang management proposal. We have to involve the people and inform the general public. So it involves implementing a social communications campaign. It will also enable financing and other resource requirements. And finally, it will strengthen local government capacity to handle and manage marine litter. Punta naman tayo sa area ng investments. This is something that the government has been working on, and with the passage of the CREATE law early this year in March, we have the Strategic Investment Priority Plan, or SIPP, which identifies priority projects and activities that can be granted incentives. And among the incentives or activities available or eligible are those that produce environment-friendly alternatives to plastic. For example, these can be qualified under different areas of the SIPP, environment or climate change related projects, production and manufacture of export products, industrial goods and processing of agri and fishery products. Also qualified are research and development work, business incubation, and commercializing new and emerging technologies. Nabanggit kanina ni Deputy Speaker Legarda yung mga biodegradable polymer studies or pilot technologies ng DOST. Yun magandang tingnan dahil nasa pilot stage and already they are poised to bring in the financing and the infrastructure para maging commercialized or upscale itong mga technologies na ito and can be made available throughout the country. And all of this work becomes even more urgent, hindi lang dahil nasa climate emergency tayo, not just the Philippines, but the whole world, but because we are in the pandemic. And our mid to long-term sectoral and economy-wide development plans, tulad ng mga nabanggit na PAP for SCP at saka yung NPOA on marine litter, these are complementing our national excuse me, climate targets, the Nationally Determined Contribution or NDC. Ito po yung national climate target that we are committing to as a member of the UN Climate Convention. And it provides that a pathway towards low carbon growth is a circular economy. And sustainability, circular economy, these are the best ways, or probably we should say the only way that we should recover from the pandemic and to prevent the next one or future crisis from happening. I also hope that we are pointing the way forward for industries in the fisheries sector to develop environment-friendly processes and materials, such as in processing and packaging, if not in our own families, our houses, our homes, and our communities. And because the circular economy is mostly focused on technology and the business side, ultimately it falls on us to make the shift and to make it permanent. And we hope that our UP Visayas community, mga scholar ng bayan, may find this webinar as a good jump-off point for the work that we should all be doing together as one nation towards a greener, safer, and more sustainable world that we want. So in closing, I'd like to thank again the UP Visayas College of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences, the organizers. We are all in this together. And thank you again for providing me and the Climate Change Commission this opportunity to dialogue with you this morning. Maraming salamat po.